Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 51 of Superannuated Starman. I'm your host, Sean Ryan, and as always, I'm joined by Chris Duerksen.
Always.
And Cory Braucks. This is going to be a shorter episode, but it's a game that we all, well, at least Chris and I don't know about Cory, but Chris and I have a lot of memories about this game. And without further ado, that game in question is Killer Instinct for the Super Nintendo. Because we're talking about a fighting game, there's only so much content available, but it's still going to be a very fun episode. With that, enjoy this music, and when we come back, we will discuss the history of Killer Instinct. Developed by Rare and published by Midway for the arcade version and Nintendo for the Super Nintendo and Game Boy ports, Killer Instinct is a 2.5D fighting game that made its claim to fame in arcades for its intense combo system, larger-than-life soundtrack, and interesting characters. Kevin Lobb, someone that we discussed in our last episode about GoldenEye, and the person for whom the Klob is named after, was working at Namco as a designer when he started working on the concept of a four-way brawler that he called Melee. He pitched the concept to his superiors, but they weren't interested in the game. Instead, James Goddard and Dave Winstead, who previously worked at Capcom, took over his project and made it a 1v1 that released under the title Weapon Lord. And according to the Wikipedia page, Kevin Lobb isn't even listed as a designer for that game. Weapon Lord released on the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis sometime in 1995, but Kevin had already left Namco by then, and the last game that he received any credit for while working at Namco was Splatterhouse 3, which released in 1993. Just to kind of give a little bit of a timeline here. Kevin decided to take his idea to Nintendo of America, who made him the lead developer of the project. Shortly afterwards, he flew out to England, joining Rare to start development on a fighting game to rival Mortal Kombat. Early in 1994, Nintendo signed off a leasing agreement with Midway to develop an early arcade-based version of the Ultra 64 hardware. This hardware was marketed to be the same that consumers would eventually get at Nintendo's next home console, the Nintendo 64. Another notable game that ran on the Ultra 64 hardware was Cruisin' USA. In fact, there's a great video out there on YouTube by Video Game Esoterica called Nintendo Lied About the Ultra 64, the imaginary world of Nintendo 64 in arcades. That goes in depth in the history of the Ultra 64. Check it out, and I will link this video in the show notes. Nintendo also joined with Williams to bring those Ultra 64 titles to Nintendo home consoles. I say consoles instead of console, i.e. the N64, which the Ultra 64 was supposed to be, despite the attract screen from Killer Instinct stating available for your home in 1995 only on Nintendo Ultra 64. The original Killer Instinct would never make it to the Nintendo 64, and instead was released on the Super Nintendo and Game Boy, when the N64 was delayed to 1996. However, Cruisin' USA eventually was ported over to the N64. This joint venture between Nintendo and Williams came at a very interesting time in gaming history when Nintendo was known for their strict stance against violent video games. If you remember, Nintendo refused to allow blood in the first Mortal Kombat game, resulting in Sega gaining a substantial market share just because of that. To prevent consumers from believing that the game may not be as violent as the name implies, George Harrison, who was the Nintendo's director of marketing, stated, quote, "Williams would not have entered into this deal if they thought their hands would be tied. We won't restrict them in any way."
Man, you're like George Harrison for a split second. I went, the Beetle? Like, what are we doing?
Fame.
Definitely a different guy. But Harrison wasn't very worried about Nintendo's stance because a rating system was expected to be in place by the time the home version was released, making it the responsibility of consumers to determine the game's rating and suitability before a purchase. And he was right. The Entertainment Software Rating Board, or ESRB, launched on September 16th of 1994, which would require a label to be placed on video games annotating the game's rating, i.e. E for everyone, T for teen, M for mature, etc., etc. Killer Instinct released on the Super Nintendo on August 30th, 1995 in North America and September 21st in Europe. Upon release, consumers found that many of the features in the arcade version were downgraded or outright removed. Whereas the backgrounds in the arcade version were stored as movies, which adjusted frames based on the player's movements. Any stage with a 3D panning camera on the SNES were simplified into a 2D panning view using parallax scrolling. Full motion videos were replaced with still images, voice samples and sound effects were shortened, and the music was downgraded in quality. Some special effects were removed due to hardware limitations. However, on the arcade side of the house, Killer Instinct was the first arcade game to use an internal hard drive, allowing it to store massive amounts of data for more detailed graphics, vastly improving a lot of these features. Despite some of these limitations, the Super Nintendo version was a commercial success and was met with positive reviews upon release. The game went on to sell over 3 million units, with more than 150,000 of those copies sold on day one in the US. Because of the game's success, a sequel was soon underway, and Killer Instinct Gold was released on the Nintendo 64 in November of 1996. But the series would lie dormant for nearly 20 years until November of 2013, when Killer Instinct was rebooted and launched as a free-to-play game on the Xbox One. All that was a mouthful, and I think I'm going to end it there. It's a really interesting history, and honestly, it was a lot deeper than I was expecting before I started digging into it. Unless you guys have anything?
No.
All right, then I think it's time for a break. Stick around, enjoy this music, and when we come back, we're going to talk about our childhood memories of playing this game.
All right, so this was one of the few Super Nintendo games that I actually owned. I'm not sure where I got it from, and I can't remember if I got this in late junior high or early high school, but I was playing this game for a while, and I loved it. This game was a natural step after I started off with Street Fighter 2, had Mortal Kombat 2, and then Killer Instinct was just so awesome when it came out, or when I finally got it, and I played. This is another one of the games I just played the snot out of. I had like, maybe 6 or 8 titles for the Super Nintendo, and this was one of them. So I played it often. I loved having friends over so I could play it against somebody, but I played this solo all the time. One thing I remember about this as a kid is just how impressed I was with the graphics. I didn't really realize it, but I mean it kind of goes along with the Donkey Kong style of graphics where it just looks kind of 3D, which was different than anything else at the time. Like Street Fighter was super 2D. Mortal Kombat was, in my opinion, it was pretty flat looking. And Killer Instinct just looked like, as weird as it sounds, they look like little action figures, like in your screen. That's the way I remember thinking of them. And I just loved it. I was really blown away by just how good and how smooth and how colorful it was, and just all the different variety and levels. And I don't remember this being too hard of a game when I was a kid. And I don't know how I got the combo lists, but I had the cheat codes for this game. I had all the move lists for everybody. And you know what? Sean, by any chance, did you look up the manual for this game?
I did, yeah.
Did it have any of the moves or anything in the manual?
It did, but not nearly as many as there actually are.
Like I very much remember playing as oh god, what's the dude's name? The boss Igor or Ilord? No,
Idol.
Idol.
You're talking about
you.
like the two-headed
Yes, the
Cyclops
boss.
kind of looking guy? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the only way you could unlock him was through a cheat code, so somehow I got the cheat codes for that. I mean, there was the internet back then, but maybe this was the first game where I actually looked up cheat codes. I don't know. But yeah, I played this a lot. I looked up the codes and stuff, and this was also the first game that I remember that introduced a combo system when I was playing it. And I don't know about you guys, but I'd never seen anything like that. Or something where you could just get a combo going and I don't know, like it fed on stuff. I'm still not exactly sure how the combo system works because I was trying to trying to do some this week when I was playing it and had no idea what I was doing. But yeah, I remember when I was a kid, I like my go-to was Fulgore, the character
I
like
was
the
just about to ask who you mained back in the day.
yeah, Fulgore. And I was able to do, like I said, I had no idea how. I was able to get a combo going on him that always ended up with a an ultra combo that like over 99 hits, and it was pretty much just guaranteed death to whoever I was fighting. And he was the only one where I was able to chain that big of a combo going. And I remember, like once you got the chain going, you could like set your controller down and it would just keep doing it for you. It was insane. It was unlike any other fighting game that I played as a kid, and it just really stuck with me, and it was a lot of fun. And also, I mean, like I said, I played this game a lot. So like Fulgore was my main, but I also loved as everybody knows, I'm awful with names. Who's the torch dude?
Cinder.
Cinder?
Yeah.
Cinder. I played Cinder a lot. I played skeleton dudes a lot. Spinal. Spinal. I played as Ilor a lot. He was a lot of fun to play with. But yeah. Right. And one stupid memory of this game is I remember I had this friend from Broadlands. This had to have been in junior high. Because thinking about it, like, because JD moved away, didn't he? But he came over and
You mean JD?
Yeah, that's his last name. Yeah. He came over and we were playing Killer Instinct and we got like so pumped up about doing it. And my mom came in the room and was like, all right, like I was supposed to rake leaves or something like that, but he was so stoked to play Killer Instinct with me that he volunteered to help me rake up leaves so we could hurry up and get back to playing Killer Instinct.
That's a real buddy right there.
Yeah. And while we were outside, we were like pretending like the rakes were like weapons from Killer Instinct, and we were like just totally just nerding out in the yard, just waiting to get back to play Killer Instinct.
Those sound like some really fun memories.
Yeah. This game definitely has a special spot in my heart.
Cory, what about you? What memories do you have of this game, if any?
Absolutely none, Sean.
This was a Nintendo exclusive, though, right? And Cory, you were a Sega household.
Well, I mean, like I had friends, but this
Did you?
was also an arcade
Did you?
game, and I have no memory of it being in the arcade either. So
I'll admit, I don't ever remember playing it in the arcade either.
That's crazy because my first memories of this game are from the arcade. I remember first seeing it there and just marveling at how cool the game sounded. And I'm not talking about the music right now, I'm talking about the announcer, which obviously the announcer is a big part of fighting games. They kind of made it that way with you think about Smash
NBA
Brothers
Jam.
or back in the day Mortal Kombat, but
I'll stay.
yeah. But in Mortal Kombat, the game's announcer sounded more dark and sinister, and it was admittedly cool, but Killer Instinct had this robotic quality to it while sounding something like you'd hear during a professional wrestling match. Especially when you heard that I can't do it any justice, but I may just splice that in here. It's an arcade, so it's designed to devour your quarters, and I definitely tried unsuccessfully to main Fulgore, but I just couldn't. It was just too difficult for me using the knob and buttons. And I also tried out Jago as well, but that's mostly just because I really like ninjas in video games.
Oh, of course, we all did.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about like Mortal Kombat and how cool the ninjas were there, I mean, that's just a kind of continuation from that. But I can distinctly remember being in the car and coming home with the Super Nintendo game. I don't remember where exactly we bought it, but I definitely remember it being packaged with a CD, Killer Cuts. Did you get that CD as well, Chris?
I did not get the CD.
Man, that sucks because it's so good.
Now, wasn't that CD wasn't that limited to like the first 50,000 copies or something like that. Wasn't that like a limited edition thing?
That I don't know, but I definitely had it. And you better believe that I threw that thing into my boombox as soon as I had the chance. But it didn't stop there when
Boombox.
say what?
You just called it a
Well,
boombox.
what'd you call it?
A CD player.
What if it was a boombox though?
I know, I know. Just calling it a boombox is so 90s. Like it just
It's a
fits so well.
specific thing though.
Uh-huh.
Well, Chris, we're old. Anyhow, but the coolness factor definitely didn't stop there because the cartridge itself was entirely black, which just added.
Oh my god, I forgot about that. It was.
Yeah, the cartridge was entirely black, adding even more of a cool factor to the game. And I hadn't even put it in my Super Nintendo yet. I was already just entranced with this. When I saw it in the arcade, I thought it was so cool. It's just the arcade made this game just so
You get my
freaking
vibes
cool.
about what I was saying about how like the graphics were just bright and colorful and clean and just they look great, right?
Well, the graphics from the arcade, you could see like this 3D panning around the character and all that. And I was hoping to get that on the Super Nintendo, but obviously we didn't. So I was a little let down when I saw it on my television. But nevertheless, this was my chance to play the game to my heart's content. No worry about quarters or anything like that. And I played the game with every character. And another thing, I eventually got a strategy guide. I think it was one of those Brady strategy guys
Oh yeah.
which had the full move set for every character. Like I was talking about, the instruction manual just has a few of their moves, but this has everything, and it expanded on their individual stories.
Isn't it amazing how there's like two companies that made strategy guides back in the day? You had like Brady and Prima, and those are like the two people that made everything.
I don't remember. I never had strategy guides.
Oh, really? I remember the first one I had was for Baldur's Gate 2 because there's just way too much going on in that game.
I can't remember the very first strategy guide I had. I think it might have been Mario Mania, which was like the strategy guide to oh my god, I'm blanking here. All four of the NES Mario games. What was it called?
Oh,
All
yeah,
Stars
that like
On Super
crazy
Nintendo?
omnibus.
Mario All Stars. Oh my god, I don't know why that was so hard to remember. But I just dived into this strategy guide and I played it nonstop with every single character, including Idol, which it did have the cheat codes as well. But on top of all of that, I had a controller that was called the SN program pad that had a little LCD screen in the top center, and you could program moves into it so that a super complex combo could be pre-programmed, and all you had to do was just tap a button, and the controller does all the inputs. And it made the game way, way, way more fun. Was it cheating? Sure, but I mostly only used it during single player, and during multiplayer is only when I was with my youngest brother. And whenever I would use it on him, he'd go tell, so I didn't get to use it very often.
Yeah, I remember those strategy guides were so cool because not only did they have like the complete walkthrough and all the items and everything, but they always had like the little like snippets of like lore and backstory and stuff in them too, and they had the little like sidebars that would explain everything to you. It was just those were always just so cool.
This is off topic, but I've always wondered about the lore in some of those games, if it was actually official or if that was just them kind of adding their
Well,
own
that's the
little.
thing is, I think if you bought the official strategy guide, that was just information they got from the devs.
Yeah, but so many of the strategy guides say like the unofficial
Oh yeah, if
Final
it was the
Fantasy 7,
unofficial
et
one,
cetera, et
but
cetera,
like
et cetera.
they're the ones that were like made by the publishers. Like I think, like I was saying, I think Brady and Prima were like the two companies that made like the official strategy guides.
Yeah, that's fair. So back to the game. I've mentioned this before. We didn't have a ton of money growing up, so I don't really remember how I ended up with all this stuff for Killer Instinct. Either my mother went the extra mile, or my great aunt, who was the one that bought the Super Nintendo for myself and my brothers in the first place, maybe they overheard us kids and made it happen. I'm not 100% sure, but I am eternally grateful to whoever did. But back to that CD. I didn't own a ton of CDs, so this got a lot of play. This is late 1995. I'm in 5th grade, and it was either this CD, Killer Cuts, the Crow soundtrack, or Korn self-titled album.
Oh, you didn't have the Space Jam theme song soundtrack?
No, I did not.
Oh, that's so sad.
If it's not obvious, I really loved this game back in the day. It was either this or Mortal Kombat 2 that I was playing if I was playing a fighting game. I definitely tried out other games in the genre, but renting Rise of the Robots, if you guys have ever played that,
I don't think, no.
it's really, really bad. And it made me wise up in a hurry because that game was a complete piece of Anyhow, that's my history with the game. Is there anything else that you guys have?
No, as I said before, I have no memory of this game.
Well, let me ask one quick question. You said like it was this or Mortal Kombat 2. If you had to choose one or the other, which one would it be?
Oh man, that's tough.
Mortal
Do I
Kombat
get
2.
to use my program pad?
Controller? No.
It's Mortal Kombat 2. Oh, I didn't talk about who I mained back in the day. So I used Fulgore when I had my
Controller?
controller. But if I was just playing by myself or if I was playing against somebody else, I use Cinder because he is the easiest combo. And it's just forward, tap, tap, and then punch. And he just turns into a pillar of flame going towards whoever. And you can just do that forever and just keep racking up the combo system. But all that said, let's take another break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about what it's like to play Killer Instinct today in 2025.
I got one more question before we move on from kid stuff. So you said you beat this as a kid, and so did I. This was one of those games I beat with every character.
Every character?
Oh yeah,
I definitely did not do that. No, no way.
because this is one of those games where I did the same thing with Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat, and plus, I mean, looking back on it, and well, especially playing it nowadays, it is a short game. Like you can get through that little tournament pretty quick.
That was kind of the way for all the fighting games in the
Yeah,
90s, though.
yeah. And
I think Mortal Kombat 3 was probably the longest because it had so many characters and you could turn on like the difficulty curve where it would start with like 8 people, and if you went all the way up to the hardest difficulty, you had to beat like everyone in the roster.
this game you had to beat everybody on the roster, but the roster isn't. I mean,
Well, that's what
I
I'm
guess
saying.
for back then it was decent. I mean, it's better than Street Fighter 2 where you only had 8 people to choose from or whatever, but it wasn't much better. But yeah, no, this was one of the games where I didn't have a whole lot of games to choose from, and I loved it so much that I'd beat it with one and then move on to the next one, and beat it with the next person. Like I kind of have a habit of doing that with all my games. Come to think about it, like I did the same thing with all the Street Fighters and Mortal Kombat. I did the same thing with all the Tony Hawk games that I played, and like.
Well, while we were briefly talking off air, Corey, you said that you didn't even see this game in the arcade, which is just baffling to me because of how popular Killer Instinct was. Like I said, it sold over 150,000 copies on day one.
He didn't just say that he didn't see it in the arcade, because I didn't see it in the arcade either. But he said he wasn't even aware of this game. Like
Yeah, I have.
you don't remember seeing this in like
Nope.
comic book ads or
I have no memory of this title. I have no memory of seeing this title. I was very surprised to see Mike Tyson. Just just completely like something lost in the past that I don't even know the new versions because they're still making them. Or at least I saw like
they made
they had a
copy.
They
made a new one that we don't have to talk about that one.
Yeah, it was just basically a reboot. So, Corey, why don't you start off with what it was like to play today because you do not have any memories of it. So, you get hopefully what is going to be an unbiased opinion on the game.
So I started playing it again, and I picked Mike Tyson, and I don't know. It they it feels like they kind of dumbed it down in terms of fighting games, like because they made it so that combos are a lot more effortless. I think is the way I would say.
I would agree with that. You
You know
you
how
get
like
one going, and yeah,
yeah, well, and that's the other thing too. Is like if you wanted to do like a Tatsumaki for Ryu, for example, you have to do like a full half circle forward with like a kick. And this one, it's just kind of like you just hit these buttons and then it happens. So it was uh it was much easier to get stuff going in this game. It's interesting. I also think it's very interesting how if you are losing, the game basically will stack the deck against you, which kind of works the other direction as well. Because if you lose to your opponent and your opponent has like half a life bar, for example, like they just get to keep that half a life bar going into the next round because it really doesn't stop the game.
But I thought that was a really interesting way
It is
of,
it is very cool, but it's
yeah.
also just like it's not it's not like a martial arts wipe the slate clean best of
fresh
3 kind
start.
of situation.
Yeah, I get it. Like they wanted to be different,
There's not 3 rounds basically.
right?
So you basically everyone has 2 life bars, and while you're fighting, if you get a guy down and you take out his life bar, he falls over and then he jumps back up with his new life bar where you keep whatever you have left over from round 1. So now he's got to beat you up for a bar and a half whereas you only have to get through one more bar.
Yes,
So it really like stacks the deck for whoever is the current like victor.
yes.
And if we were playing versus mode, I think that would be incredibly infuriating for someone that was like trying to learn the game.
I can understand that mindset. And I actually agree with you where that would be very frustrating. But I really like that game mechanic. I thought it was a really neat way
It's a
of,
very interesting twist.
yeah. And I hadn't seen anything like that
Compared to
before.
everything else.
But as far as the game, you felt that it was kind of dumbed down a little bit, but how far did you get in the game?
I beat the campaign on whatever like normal difficulty.
I just had a thought when you were talking about calling it dumbed down. I think that today in 2025, we would call that like an accessibility option.
Sure.
That instead of having to do like a half circle, crescent, and XYZ, instead you
Made it
just,
very much easier for a pick up and play type of game.
which I also really enjoyed in 1995 because I was not great at video games, specifically fighters at that time, and they were just known to be outrageously brutal.
Yeah, it was great for 12-year-old me.
Well, Corey, if you don't have anything else, Chris, what are your thoughts about replaying the game today?
Well, I was just about to say, speaking of like 12-year-old me, like one thing this game did do, like you mentioned before, like supposedly they were not limited by Nintendo on how graphic it could be, but yet it was still very tame compared to any other fighter game. Well, I mean, not it was tame compared to Mortal Kombat. Like the fatalities were not that bad. Some of them were goofy. Some of them were like some of them like you dance with your opponent instead. Like the humiliation.
Instead of like babality or friendships?
Yeah, like I'm just saying, like me playing this as a kid made me realize maybe this kind of was catered toward a younger crowd. I mean, it was definitely a cool game and everything, but yeah, like it wasn't as for supposedly not having any limitations on how graphic they could have made this or how violent they could have made this. Which, I mean, we
Well,
we know
you say that, but they still had to get through like the ESRB. So
did they? I mean, wasn't that
we were
weren't we
just
talking about
talking
like
about
that?
that.
Yeah, that's when the rating system was first kind of coming around. So
right, but they still
maybe they're
like
playing it safe. Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. Like this is a brand new regulation board, so they had to make sure that it got through. I mean, this probably had like an M rating when it came out, or teen at least.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
But like they had to make sure that they could get this into arcades still. So even though they had a better working relationship with Nintendo, like it still had to ride that line of like being palatable for the market as a whole.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it was rated T for teen, so that's 13 plus. So they are definitely going to want to cater to an audience where they can get as many people on board as possible. They want to sell games. I mean, let's not like beat around the bush. It's a business first, so they want to sell video games. And I think T for teen was the sweet spot for them to say like, okay, we're a little edgy, but we're not like ripping people's organs out and strangling them
Yeah,
to death with them.
exactly. And I thought that was kind of like a cool move. Like it did seem to have much more appeal to everybody rather than just being this brutal fighting game where everything was difficult and combos were super hard and like I remember like Mortal Kombat, like some of it was just a lot of it was just me beating my head against the wall just hoping to get through with a character, you know. Whereas this game, it just even like Corey said, it just seemed like dumbed down, like it, which I take it mean it was easier compared to other games at the time.
Well, even playing it today, when I think about playing Mortal Kombat and trying to get through the game on those just harder, those further stages where the computer is just cheating so hard,
Yeah.
I would be doing leg sweeps and trying to chain that with uppercuts, which would mysteriously go through the player. I didn't feel like this game cheated nearly as hard as Mortal Kombat did. I felt like, yes, it was dumbed down a little bit, but it was also more fair of a game.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that until you just mentioned that. But yeah, we've had some other games where we replay it and you can really notice the like what do they call it when the move reading or the input reading that the games would
Yeah.
do. This game, I didn't notice that at all. Whereas other games that we played, like what did we play Mortal Kombat 2? And like you could really notice that.
We played 1 and 2.
Yeah, we played 1 and 2, and those games were just absurd with the
Yeah,
input reading. Yeah, it was
yeah,
To
impossible
the
on
point
some of the
where
later
Sean
stages.
had a video about it.
yeah. Or like when your punch just completely just ghosts through somebody's face and they hit you anyways. This game actually seemed fair and fun to play, and yeah,
I think that's what kind of makes this game more palatable to play today because it is a little cheesy. And I think that the characters aren't necessarily as cool as some of the Mortal Kombat ones, but that also might be the legacy that they built up over the years. But going into this, I was really nervous about playing this game because I have so many fond memories of it. And especially after playing GoldenEye and discovering that, oh no, this game was way better in my memories. I was worried about having the same thing happen again, but I was not disappointed. It was a lot of fun to play this game. I didn't feel like I was being cheated when I got on the later stages. I still had that feeling of excitement when you do something cool, especially when you get that combo breaker. That's never not going to be cool. It was just such a fun experience to play this game for the last couple of weeks.
so you're talking about you were worried about popping back in and not living up to your memory. I popped this game back in, and it's like I'd never turned it back off again. Like I went straight back to the '90s. Like as soon as the little load screen came up, it was like no time has passed at all, and like it felt like I was just playing this game a week ago. It was so weird. There's very few times where I can actually think of anything that triggers my nostalgia like that, and this game definitely did. There were a few things that I couldn't quite remember, but right away I was like, oh yeah. I couldn't remember the combos, but as far as like characters and just the music and the levels and just the graphic style and the models and everything about this game.
You likened them to action figures earlier, and I thought that was a really spot on comparison. That's exactly how I kind of look at them now when I think about it. I'm looking at some video of it, and yeah, they're like little action figures going across the screen. It's such a good game.
They look like little action figures that I totally would have been playing with in the 90s. Like, and they look so cool. And one thing I have been thinking about, and while I was playing this game, is I've kind of been like with GoldenEye, I was a little rough about if it holds up or not.
Well, hold on to that thought for our final thought.
Okay. One more thing about playing it today. Like, who did you play with? Like, who were you maining as an adult without your cheat controller?
Oh, Cinder. Yeah, because he's the only one that I can actually do anything with without that controller.
I went straight back to Fulgore. like it really felt like no time has passed. I went straight to Fulgore right away, and it wasn't until I played a few rounds with him where I was like, okay, all right, I'm gonna try Cinder. I'm gonna try Spinal again.
The only character that I really don't like is Saberwolf. I think he's really
Oh.
cheesy and just
Yeah.
not very fun to play with.
Thunder. What? Chief Thunder? Is that his name?
T-Hawk.
T-Hawk.
Is it
No, T-Hawk is from
Street Fighter?
I think
Okay,
it's-
yeah, I've got
I
some.
think it's Chief.
some
Yeah, I think it's
bleed
Chief
going
Thunder.
on here.
Oh man, playing that
I think he's really fun to play
cringe.
with, but I think
All I gotta say
that
is
name
it's cringe, and all of his animations are just cringe. Like,
his name now is just Thunder because they dropped the Chief sometime in the early
probably
2000s.
good for them that they did that, but I mean,
yeah, that's just kind of expected with the climate today.
yeah, there's so much. Yeah, exactly, and there's so much stuff from the '90s that like doesn't age well. And I even told myself, I'm like, oh, okay, try not to complain about this too much, but I can't help myself. Like, oh.
Well, with that out of the way, I think that we now have said everything we need to say. So let's take a break. We'll come back, do our final thoughts, and close out the show. Welcome back, everybody. This is our last segment where we discuss our final thoughts. Is this game really worth playing today in 2025, or is it something that should be left back in the 90s? For myself, at least, this game absolutely holds up. I felt it was fantastic. I still feel like I did back then. And like Chris was saying, it's that nostalgia. It's so easy to get back into this game, and you don't feel hindered by not being very good at, because like Cory said, the moves are maybe a little dumbed down, but it's easier to pull things off. You still get that excitement of making these outrageous combos. The characters are interesting, even if they're not all super fun. It's just a good game. It's a solid fighter, and I'm really surprised that it didn't have a legacy like Mortal Kombat did. Chris, what are your thoughts about this game? Is it something you're going to keep playing? Are you going to share it with your son?
So that was the one thing I was kind of leading to, is like on other games where we're kind of like, oh, this doesn't hold up. When we first started doing these episodes, a lot of the games probably don't hold up as well as I think they do, but I have so much nostalgia tied to them. This is definitely one of those games. Like, this was such a nostalgia trip that I really enjoyed playing it again. I did not show it to Gibbs just because he's not really into fighting games like this. So I didn't even really try to. Plus, it might have been the combos might have been frustrating to him and stuff like that. So I did not show it to Gibbs, but if he's down for it when he's older, I will definitely, like, if we bust out the Super Nintendo like family get-togethers with my nephews and stuff, I would definitely pull this game out because it is so much fun and it is easy to pick up and play, and just you're able to enjoy it after a 10-minute warm-up. You know what I mean? Like, where some games, like, the learning curve is a brick wall. This game, yeah, like after 10 minutes of it, I kind of felt like I was getting my old stuff back to it. At least I was able to enjoy it again. that quickly. So yeah, this game definitely holds up to me. I would definitely recommend anybody check it out if you want to see some really cool retro fighting game. Which, by the way, like this game was way ahead of its time as far as like graphics, and I think the combo system was ahead of its time. I can't be certain about it because during its time, my frame of reference was Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat 2. So yeah, no, I think this game definitely holds up, and it definitely, like you said, I'm surprised there's no legacy for it because it definitely seemed like it really added to the fighting genre and it definitely brought something to the table. So, yeah, check it out.
Cory, what are your thoughts? Are you going to keep riding this train, or are you going to bring Chris and I back down to earth and give us some more grounded thoughts on this title?
Eh, it's fun. I mean, it. I don't think there's anything necessarily to write home about. It did play. It's a perfectly functional title. Um, do I need to play it? No, I don't think I really need to play it. It's it was probably a much bigger back in the day when you guys had less like polished fighters to play with. But in today's market, there's really nothing to say about this. If you're looking for competitive play, this is obviously not an option because I don't think there's anyone playing this online right now. But there's nothing particularly wrong about it. It was a perfectly like well balanced thing. The the whole health bar thing felt kind of one sided, as I said previously. So obviously it's not really something you could fairly play with other people with, but other than that, no, it's perfectly fine. Mike Tyson's in it, which is kind of cool. And I don't know, it's like a B minus.
That's honestly a lot better than I was expecting to hear out of you. I thought you were just going to thrash.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to
No,
thrash
like
the
there's
two of us and
nothing
be like, it was
like
absolute trash.
if I were 9 years old again or whatever, and we had to pick a fighting game, I would not pick this. I would probably say Street Fighter 2. But I mean, it's there's nothing particularly wrong with it. I think it also is very cool that you have these like 3D models because this is definitely not something you'd expect to see from 1994, especially in a home console market. So it looks really neat. The backgrounds are nothing to really write home about. They all fit well. The characters are varied enough to be interesting. Everyone's got kind of little quirks. You got the fireball man, you got the guy like with the knight armor with the claws, you got the werewolf, you got Mike Tyson, you got the robot, you got the skeleton man.
You have Glacier.
Yeah, it's like there's a decent variety. It's not a bad title at all. Like it's fun, but it's also kind of like a middle of the road thing. It's like there's nothing that makes it particularly stand out, and there's nothing that really hooks me to it. It has no like big established franchise in my head, so it's a cool fighter.
Well, like I said, that's a lot better than I was expecting. And having absolutely no memory whatsoever to at least giving it a B minus, I'll take that. I'll take that. And
Totally.
yeah, I'm pretty happy with how the show turned out. So everyone out there, like I said, this was a much shorter episode. We chose a smaller game because we've just got a lot going on with our lives. But our next game is going to be a lot more difficult than this one, and that game is going to be Comics Zone for the Sega Genesis. So I hope to see you then, and stick around. We've been Superannuated Starman.